of our podcast. Appreciate you listening in. I'm with Roy again.
Hey, James.
Hey, Roy. How are you doing? Haven't seen you this week because I was off yesterday.
I know. What's up with that?
It's only Tuesday.
I know.
We have a special guest today. Another one of our amazing staff here at Christian Heritage. Amber Koehler is with us. Thanks for joining us, Amber.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to be talking about trauma in the holidays today. We're a little early on this. It's October. We're getting into November and December, and we have this episode coming out in October for a reason, so that you don't all of a sudden start to think the week of November, oh, how do I handle the holidays with everything that I have going on? And for some of you listening, you are foster parents, some of you are host homes, some of you just like listening to our podcasts, and maybe you don't serve with us or another organization, but man, the holidays bring a lot of pain, a lot of struggle. Sometimes the holidays create trauma. And so we wanted to do this early so that we could begin to think about how to handle that. And so Amber is a former foster parent, adoptive parent. She works with adoptive parents now. I like to think of you as some sort of an expert in this. I don't know that you would say that.
No.
And Roy, throughout his life, has worked with kids who are vulnerable as well, and so has some great perspective on this. So that's what we're going to do today. But Amber, first, could you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do at CH. Maybe you could get into a little bit of your story and working with kids as well.
Yeah, sure. So I am Amber Koehler. I started at Christian Heritage in, I believe it was the end of April, beginning of May. And my role here is the permanency support specialist. So I do some trainings with families that are moving toward adoption. And then after the adoption is finalized, then I get to be the support person that they contact if they have any needs. A lot of this is newer to Christian Heritage. So a lot of it is we're still developing as we go, which has been kind of fun to have some say in that piece. As far as my experience, we were foster parents for, I think it was almost 12 years. We have 9 kids that we call our own, 6 in our home, 3 biological, 6 through foster care. Our oldest daughter has aged out of the system and lives in Omaha with her 2 babies, but she's still considered ours. So, so we've had lots of kiddos in our home, and we've had some that have reunified. The call to foster care was really something that I felt at a pretty young age. And I don't even know that it was foster care. It was more adoption. And then once we were married and started having kiddos of our own, it took me a long time to convince Chad, 2 years actually, that this is the route we should go. It was a lot of praying, but it was a lot of seeing other people say yes and watching them walk through it and being like, you know what, I think we could do this. And so once we started, we were really all in. There was times when I wanted out, but Chad would say no. And then there was times when Chad wanted out and I would say no. And so it wasn't until we adopted the 6th kiddo and we're like, okay, we're at max.
Well, that's awesome. I think your family history gives you such a tremendous perspective as you step into your role. You've been there. So it's one thing to say, I do this job and I get to help you. It's another to say, hey, I've been there.
Yeah.
Roy, you get to do that too, albeit from a different role, but it's powerful when you're like, I have taken kids in and now they're still a part of my family.
Yeah.
Right. That's beautiful. So, okay, let's kind of get into our topic here. First question that I have is, Amber, as you think about all that you and Chad have done and now what you do now in your job, what are some of the biggest obstacles to just enjoying the holidays for families either with trauma or those who are serving vulnerable people?
So I think for something that that we really had to work through, and I will say that we did this for a lot of years and probably did it wrong. It was a lot of trial and error, but the biggest thing is that you have to lower your expectations. So one of the things that our kiddos struggled with, one of the girls that we had in our care, was whenever she was with family, and me and Chad both come from pretty good sized families. So whenever we were all together, one of the things that always happened was inevitably she would say, I miss my mom. And it was at those times where there was tons of people around. It was happy. There was, unlimited snacks and candy, and we had presents and games. And that's when she would go to that. And I was always like, why does this continue to happen now? Like, what is happening that is triggering this? And so I asked her therapist one time, I was like, I don't understand. Like, it is a happy time. Like, there's nothing sad about this. And she said, well, because it's for her, it's not how it's supposed to be. Her mom should be there, or she should be with her mom. And so I think that really put it into perspective for me that, like, it can be the best day ever. They can get every single present they wanted. They can have a great day, but in the back of their mind, there's always a piece missing. And so I think when you look at your holidays through that, you do take it on a little bit differently, and you do think through, well, my child may have a huge meltdown in the middle of opening gifts because their mom is not there to see them get this present, and that is really, really hard. And for me too, like, I love my family. I am really close with my family. And so if I can frame it in that, like, if I was somewhere that was super fun and exciting, but my parents weren't there or my sisters weren't there to celebrate that with me, that would be really, really hard for me.
That's really good. And I think, like, as somebody who, I still get excited about Thanksgiving, Christmas. Like, I love it. And I mostly love it because my kids love it, and you're around people and you get to share those memories. Like, as an adult who is maybe one of those extended family members that you love, like, I have to be willing to also lower my expectations. And so
Right.
temper my excitement, especially if I'm around a child who is not in their own home and they're coming over. Like, I have to be willing to say, am I going to serve this family, this child, and kind of temper my expectations? Roy, what would you add to that? What would be some of the biggest obstacles you've seen over the years in terms of obstacles to enjoying the holidays?
I would just say, just kind of reasonable expectations about your own expectations. When Karen and we were served at a residential school, we had 10 girls in our home. The holidays, all of them had very different reactions to the holidays and what it meant for each of them. And so it was very difficult to say what kind of experience, a lot of our kids never had presents under the Christmas tree and, celebrated it in more this kind of, I would say, Judeo-Christian value kind of Christmases. And so for us, it was kind of leaning in and adjusting what would make it an enjoyable for them, and just kind of tethering our expectations to where they were at, and just really trying to lean into, as Amber just really eloquently talked about, their, what made Christmas special for them. And oftentimes it wasn't the things or the activities, it was the connections they had. And there's no way that I can replace or replicate that. So I think it's just kind of leaning into that in a way that there's this, we talk a lot about TBRI, that level of felt safety for them in regards to those experiences. But if I go in thinking we're giving you all of these things and why are you not happy? Like, you're just setting up that entire experience, I think, with failure for all of them. And then now you're just adding to that loss that, I think everyone is, kind of managing and navigating.
So then if I'm an extended family member, here's what I think could happen is an uncle or an aunt or grandma and grandpa could really well-meaningly say, hey, smile, it's Christmas. Hey, it's Thanksgiving, you're eating pie. Or even, in a couple weeks here, hey, it's Halloween, you're getting trick-or-treat, you're going trick-or-treating, you're getting a bunch of candy. That's, I think people really mean well, but that doesn't help. And so, Amber, what do you think an extended family member who's listening could do instead? How did they come alongside a parent, a foster parent, a host home, whoever's serving a child, to really lean into that situation in a helpful way?
Well, I think some of it's just being aware that this is hard. And even in that, like, it's almost like you have to set up the people around you to lower their expectations also. And if it's someone that's been in your life prior to just the holidays, then they may know, like, okay, this may be hard for these kids, or this child may react this way. And oftentimes I think too, it's encouraging to let them to still let the kids know that you're glad they're there. Like, hey, I see you're not smiling, but we're really glad you're here with us. And,
Mm.
and even just acknowledging the hard. I mean, my kiddos, especially my older daughter, I mean, if someone acknowledges that, you know what, this is really hard, that's important to her. Like if someone sees the hard she's sitting in, I mean, that means a lot to her.
That's good.
If I could, I think to add to that, James, Karen and I, over a course of our life, have done a lot around grief around the holidays. And obviously that's dealing more with death and loss. And so part of that is working, we've come alongside a lot of kids. My wife has done a lot of great work, coming along children who've lost a parent, a grandparent. And how do you navigate, that significance. And one of the things I find interesting within the lens of foster care or serving vulnerable children, I think at some level we're navigating both, right? So when you think about trauma, there's a lot of fear associated with trauma, but when you think of grief, you're thinking of loss. And I think as Amber's, talking about those, a lot of our foster kids are navigating both of those very intense levels of feelings of, this isn't what I know. It's not familiar. I want to be with my family, although I appreciate, right, these people. They're loving, they're kind, there's things I'm getting, but they're navigating loss. But there's also fear associated with that because of some of the traumatic experiences. And so I think just being mindful of that, and I think Amber talked a lot about that. We have to educate our extended families and those that we spend the holidays with too. I mean, we have a responsibility to let them know, just because we're providing all of these things, that's not necessarily going to help ease that level of grief or trauma or loss that the children are experiencing.
That's good. And I think it can be especially hard for grandparents, that it may hit them the hardest. They might feel the closest, obviously, to somebody like you, Amber, your parents. I'm not saying this about your parents, of course, but the grandparents may feel that. And I think on our side, we can say, well, we can empathize with that, but here's the reality. Here's what we really need from you, to serve this child well, or these children well.
Well,
so let's talk. Go ahead.
James, if I could add though, I think the other part of that isn't just that child, it's our families.
It's everyone. Yep.
Right. Because, part of that at some level, they might be giving up what has been traditional for them as we lean into these, and let's be honest, not every extended family might be thrilled that we're doing this work. And so, there is some level of an intrusion of those kinds of things as we care for the vulnerable. So that's where it adds to that level of complexity and messiness of our own biological kids and, extended family and how they're doing that. And I think it's really important for parents, to really lean in and really be aware, how's everyone doing with this? And the more felt safety people feel, the more that you'll have those really transparent conversations that really allows us, I think, again, to be trauma informed and just gospel centered in regards to really what is the true heart of the holidays and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and how do we invite Jesus into these spaces as well?
That's good. So on the positive side, Amber, you said at the beginning, you and Chad, your husband, tried a lot of trial and error. But obviously you guys have been doing this a while. You probably learned some things. So as you've gone on in life, how have you helped prepare foster children and your own children to get through the messiness of the season, and probably even in some ways embrace it? So what are some things, some strategies that you guys have used toward that?
So one of the things that we did, I remember, I don't think it was the first Thanksgiving that they were one of our placements. It may have been the second year that they were with us. And so the kiddos would have been like probably 1 and 3 or 4. They were pretty young, but they had a visit scheduled for Thanksgiving Day, and they were set to leave at like 1 o'clock, which visits on holidays are so incredibly tricky because sometimes you get substitute workers, I mean, it's really, really chaotic. And I understand the push behind them, but it is very, very chaotic. And then you add in family and all that thing. But one of the things that we did on that Thanksgiving was we actually plated food for the bio family, and we sent it on the visit, and that just meant so much to our kids, and it also meant a lot to the bio parents. It was including them in our day. Like, obviously we couldn't have them sit at our table. That was not a reality at that point. But we included them in their day, and it meant a lot to their kids to be able to be like, look, we brought you food. And so even within Christmas, I mean, those, especially for the foster kiddos and the kiddos that you're serving, including their biological family, no matter how that looks, is so important. And it bridges that gap between the bio family and the foster family in just a little bit of way.
That's great.
As far as like preparing our own kids, I asked my 15-year-old yesterday, I'm like, what did we do that helped you? And she's like, I have no idea. You just talked to us a lot. So apparently we talked to them a lot about how the kids might be feeling, and that sort of stuff. But it is a lot of preparation up beforehand. I mean, even now, so we've done this, we're 12 years in. Some of our kiddos have been with us for going on 9 years. And I tell people all the time, as soon as I get out the Christmas decorations, it is chaos in our home. Like, that is such a huge trigger for them. And so it's just knowing ahead of time that this is going to be a problem. Like, this is not a problem, but this is going to make some really big feelings in our house, and how are we going to work through them? And so it's really being aware, I guess, yourself of what you know is going to happen. And you may not know, like, it may be your first year with foster kids in your home, and that's okay. But I think it's having conversations and acknowledging the hard again. Like, that is so important. And just moving forward, including them in things. Like in our house, you get a Christmas decoration or a Christmas ornament to hang on the tree every year. And so, like, I went back and bought some for like baby's first Christmas, even though they were in our home. But when everybody else laid out theirs, if they didn't, if she only had 3 and everybody else had 5 or 6 and she should have had more, then that was a big deal to her. So did she really get that ornament on that year? No. Does it matter? Absolutely not. She has it, and that's what's important. So it's really important to include biofamily if you can. Like, that seemed to be what kind of bridged that gap a little bit for our kiddos.
That's great.
You know, the things I love about that, Amber, when we've done grief counseling, one of the things we talk about is, especially in the holidays, is to kind of have a plan. So like a fire drill. And we would talk about, and giving people permission. Like, there's moments you're still opening up gifts if no one's there to do that, or that one thing they always cook that's not there. Like, all of those things could be triggers. And so one of the things I love about what you're talking about was those conversations. Like, you set, almost like, hey, if you're feeling sad, it's okay.
Yeah.
And what do we do about that? Like, I want you to say, or, you might have a gestures like, it's okay. I might go to my room and do that. And having a plan with that, I think when you're able to lay that stuff out, like you were just talking about, including the bio family in that, but the more that you can navigate those transitional kinds of periods or emotions that might hit you that you don't necessarily expect, but giving permission when those do hit, of what am I supposed to do when those hit, I think is absolutely huge in terms of making ultimately the holidays actually a really powerful, positive experience. Even if it's, emotionally messy, you can still make that a super positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Roy, I know you talked about the trauma and loss work that you and Karen have been through. So from that perspective, what have you guys done, even with your own kids, girls that you've served, to kind of prepare them to get through the holidays?
Well,
because like you said, that's a different kind of topic, but I think it's still under the same umbrella of trauma.
Yeah. I mean, Amber hit on it. It's all about prep. And so, for Karen and I, is we've got to be on the same page about going into the holidays, our expectations, what could be those. I think there's a lot of self-care and self-awareness around where we were as a couple, and ultimately, what do the children need from us? But if we can't even answer that, there's no way we're going to be able to give that to the kids. And so I think, as a couple coming together and really making sure that we have a clear plan, expectations around that. And then I think it's just authentically, transparently being able to have the right conversations, obviously, depending on the ages of your kids and being age appropriate. I know, especially with our bio, we have 3 kids, how we have leaned in with them and talked about where they are at and making sure they're on board as we were, again, serving kids. All those things are really important. And then we would really focus on activity. And so we would have very tangible things to do, whether that was cookie decorating or the more that we could create those experiences of engagement, we found that to be a much more positive way than a lot of downtime, and obviously allowing downtime. But I think just downtime, left to your own thoughts and emotions, but continue to create. When we think about TBRI and felt safety and connections, the more that you can do that, I think the more positive, we've been able to navigate those things. But giving people an opt out when they're not there, I think that's always the key versus trying to slug it out. And, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room a little bit. I think the more that you can do that, it lends itself really well to having, again, more positive experiences.
I think that's great advice. And it's also good for a family who, is just the typical average family out there. Maybe they don't have a child from trauma in their home at the holidays, but it seems like families either go, hey, we have 100% downtime, or we pack our schedule and we're doing every Christmas light thing, every concert, everything. And it's like, well, there needs to be some balance just for your own regulation, right? Your own sanity, I think. And so how much more when, we have children who are vulnerable in our homes. You got to have that balance. Were you going to say something there, Amber?
I was just thinking too, like, it's when you plan your activities, for us, like, it was finding activities that, like, going and looking at Christmas lights, everyone's buckled in their seat. You don't have to control the mass chaos of walking through a store. You're all controlled. And so that's something we can do as a family, even if we have a whole bunch of little kids that feel really out of control. Like, that was something that we could do easily, finding those activities. Movie nights at home, those were great, because if we had a kiddo that was having a meltdown, we could still go on with that activity, deal with that kiddo, but it wouldn't affect all the other kiddos in our house too. So you may have to pivot some of your expectations or your activities to fit your family better.
That's good. Well, let's talk about churches for a second. Amber's a part of a wonderful church. I know that churches are not always responsive in the way that we'd hope. Sometimes it can be a struggle for them, even ministers, to understand, trauma. That's why we do what we do in terms of becoming a trauma responsive community, and the church meetings, info meetings that we have. We have a lot of great church partners, and we're trying to create more, but a lot of them don't understand trauma. And so they might mean well. And I'll give an example. I won't say who, I won't say what church, but I know a person who went to a church and is no longer there. And it's not in Nebraska. Don't worry. But the pastor and the pastor's spouse was like, well, we don't see you around very much. And so instead of kind of lovingly saying, what can we do to serve you? It was, why aren't you coming to church? Well, trauma, ABC, XYZ, here's what's going on. It wasn't met with empathy. It wasn't met with compassion. Ultimately, it drove this couple and their foster children, who are now adopted, away from that church to another church. So that's what not to do. Hey, why aren't you here? Why don't you come more? Well, Christmas Eve is chaotic and we weren't able to make it. And there's a lot of excitement coming the next day, yada, yada, yada. What are some positive things, Amber, that churches can do to come alongside families who are serving so that they do feel welcome, even if they're not always able to be physically present at, church community things during the holidays?
I think it's going back to acknowledging and putting yourself in that family's shoes. So, hey, Sunday I sat down in church, and it's not even the holidays yet. I sat down in church and I looked at the guy sitting next to me, and I'm like, I don't even know why I'm here today. Like, this is chaos, and it's 10 minutes into church. So it's just, I think it's for the church. We do have a really great church, and we've been very blessed to be part of that and be supported the way we have been. But it's it's allowing space for that chaos, I think. And just to be like, hey, you know what? I know that you got nothing out of church, but we're really glad to see you're here, or those things. And it's again making those connections with our foster kids and our kids that are coming from trauma. Church connections are really, really important because we want them to feel like that's a safe place. There was a time when we had a Christmas program and my daughter's biological parents showed up, and they showed up late, but it was evident on my daughter's face that her parents were there. Like her whole face just lit up when they walked through the door. And I had somebody that very unexpectedly came up to me later and was like, you guys are doing such a good job. Like it was evident that
It's good.
What felt connected as soon as her bio parents walked in. It was just a really good moment that they even acknowledged it, that they realized the piece of trauma that had just happened and the little bit of healing that had happened, that they recognized that and that they were able to come tell me that.
I love the phrase you just used, allowing space for the chaos. I mean, there's a whole podcast season right there,
Right.
churches, right? But that's perfect. Like allow space for the chaos, which if we're honest in North American church culture, we're just not good at.
No.
At all. You both are, if you're not watching the podcast, both of them shook their heads. No, we're not good at that because we don't like the gray. We like it black or white. You're either in or you're out. Somebody walking into the middle of a church concert, right? You're like, shouldn't happen.
Right.
You know, cell phone goes off. It shouldn't happen. Baby's crying. It shouldn't happen. But how do we get to the point where we welcome that, the messiness? I think is huge. Because if that happened in our living rooms, it would be no big deal. Oh, somebody else came. Let's go to the door and see who we can't wait for them to come in. But for some reason, when we get in a church building, it can feel, different, I think. Roy, do you have anything to add there? I know this is big on your heart too.
Well, yeah, we have to create, I love this. We have to create the space to know each other's story. The church, and by the way, this is not disparaging. James and I always feel like we walk a tightrope of not falling into, hey, let's bash the church. It's not that. I do feel like there's got to be a level, though, that a church really needs to understand its constituency. We're over-programmed in today's Americanized church. We are. It's, to your point, it's a cell phone goes off. We're annoyed by whose cell phone just went off. But we don't have the time and capacity in a 90-minute service to know each other's story. I would say, churches should know, if you're in church leadership, you should know who in your church is doing foster care. You should know who's caring for the vulnerable, who maybe is working with those who are, being trafficked. Like whatever that work is, a church should be aware of that because of the level of caregiving, that's happening in there and the supports that they need. A quick story. So when we were at a residential school as house parents, it was very difficult to get to church and care for ourselves really well. And any time that the church offered programming, it was never in our schedule. Like we could never do that. And I remember meeting once with a church saying, hey, I just want you to know there's an incredible opportunity for the church to do something that's way out of the box, outside of your normal programming of things, because there's an entire community that no one is serving, right? Here's a golden opportunity. And it was interesting to have the conversation. I think they were sensitive, like, how do we even make that work? But part of that is those were huge felt needs as we're caring for kids, as we're caring for that. And I think there were some small things that they were able to do. But we needed Bible studies. We needed couple studies. We needed, evenings. Like, to be honest with you, it was beautiful. Our church opened up their doors at 9:00 at night, and they allowed a bunch of foster dads, house dads, get together at 9:00 at night, because that's by the time we had all the kids down, we would have time of prayer and just some fellowship. And then we would be eating wings, no lie, at like 11:00 at night. We would go to 1 a.m. because that was our fellowship. That was our, so part of that is the church gave us the space to be able to do that. And I think that's really what the church should do in regards to, do you even know the needs of those sitting in there? I guarantee there are those caring for children, and it is leaning in and listening and saying, what can we do in the space to encourage them who are literally living out James 1:27. And I think the church has an obligation to care well for them in that space.
That's good. That's really good. We got a couple minutes left here. Amber, basically, I'm asking you now, what would you want someone to have said to you? See, I want you to take a couple minutes to encourage people. So we'll start with this. What encouragements would you give to foster parents or host homes or even mentors, who work with vulnerable parents who are gearing up for the holidays and they don't think they're ready? What encouragement would you give?
I think that no matter what, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how chaotic it was. It doesn't matter if everything went perfectly right. It's that you spent time with them. You made an effort to connect to them. You put in the work to make it a special day. And it will look different for everyone. But I think that it's not about the gifts. It's not about all the things that you can do. It's about making them feel loved and wanted.
That's good. That's good. Now, on the other side of that, someone's going to get through the holidays, probably me. And I'm going to be like, man, I blew it. I blew it again. I lost it on my spouse, my kids, my parents, cousin Eddie, whatever. I lost it on someone. And maybe they feel like they had too much pressure on themselves or something went sideways relationally and they feel guilty or they feel ashamed. And so they're listening to this podcast January 2nd. How would you encourage those people?
I mean, gosh, just because the holidays are over doesn't mean that everything is over. Like, you still work on those relationships. You can go back and ask for forgiveness. There's still grace for the next day. I think it just continues. I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves that this day has to be perfect when in reality, it's just part of the relationship. That day is just a tiny little piece of your entire relationship with those people. And so you go back and you do what you can to mend fences and you keep going. I think some of that is the beauty in that is like when our kiddos see us have a disagreement with a family member and then be able to go back and still be friends with them or still have conversation with them. I mean, what are we modeling? We're modeling that, we're modeling forgiveness, and that's huge for our kids to see. And even in that, I mean, there's been times where we've had conversations in our home that have been like, look, today was not what we wanted it to be. Today was awful, but it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. It was one day. We can celebrate your birthday again tomorrow, or we can still celebrate Christmas on January 3rd. It's okay. It's again going back to being flexible.
I know there have been a lot of times with my own children where I've said, man, I blew it. I'm so sorry I got angry. And one of them will inevitably look at me and go, you were angry? Like,
right.
What? You thank God you don't remember that. Now, that's not the case for all children, but I imagine some it is. And a lot of times I do think as adults, we put so much pressure on ourselves to make, especially holidays, Christmas in particular, just perfect.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because, if we had good experiences as children, we want to pass that on. And I could guarantee we could go back. I could talk to my parents, be like, man, yeah, James, you had great memories of the holidays, but let me tell you about this one, doozy.
Right.
And it wasn't so great. And I'm like, oh, I don't even remember that. And so, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, I think. And if we're caring for children who have trauma, I think we feel that even more because we want it to be so perfect.
Well,
yeah.
If I could just add, James, and I love what Amber, what you were sharing. There is no end destination. I think sometimes we like, well, this all has to go. So we get here and then we miss out on the process itself. And the process is filled with disappointment. The process is filled with letting other people down. The process is blowing it. And that through that is where really forgiveness and grace and mercy really, I think, especially for Christian families, is really the essence of the gospel and how it is lived out in these homes, which think about for a lot of the kids that we serve, they might not know that. Like, I blew it and this means this. It means this level of punishment. It means this level of thing. And like, yeah, that might have been the best experience, but the next day I have another chance. I'm not isolated. I'm not shamed. So I think those are the kinds of things that those processes allow for, that next great success. And I love what Amber just talked about. It's like, well, you know what? Jesus actually wasn't even born on December 24th. Let's
do it again.
January 2nd works too. I mean, it's like, so but I think that's the beauty. I think that's the beauty of a foster family. I really do. I think that's the beauty of the adoptive family. They get it in ways that I don't think the traditional family gets it of, what, today didn't work out, but tomorrow we're going to give it another try and another shot. And it's another new day for us to continue to make growth and connections. And I really think that's the beauty that all of us need to be able to show in our homes.
I mean, Amber, what you described is discipleship, and we talk about that a lot on the podcast. We haven't had, Roy, I don't think we've had an episode on discipleship, because this is all discipleship. It's what it is. Whether somebody's following Jesus or not, it's kind of just my personal opinion. We're helping everyone become a disciple, and it's up to Jesus whether or not they meet him. But I can't control that. And so all of this, the modeling, the talking, as you pointed out earlier with one of your daughters, right? It's all a part of the process. And it's in those moments when it's messy that, well, we're going to really see what, as disciples we're made of here. Do we have the stuff of Jesus or don't we? And even when we don't, Jesus has grace on us and gives us a new day.
Well, James, that's what I love. Like, so when Amber, when you shared, it's like, hey, there's a lot of trial and error, but when your daughter shared, it was just a lot of talking. Like, I think that's an example of, like, she walked away. There's a lot of talking. You're thinking, man, there was a lot of mistakes made, but it's the strength of the quality of that relationship that really helps absorb both the highs and the lows. Right. And it is like, you know what? It was messy, but man, they loved me. They cared well for me. Even when I was at my most unlovable, and I think we could say that too as parents, like, even when I'm at my most not lovable places, that's the love that absorbs, the grace that absorbs all of those, hard things and messy things as well. So. Yeah.
Well, Amber, this has been so good. Thanks for all that you've done for children. I know that's not why you do it. And thanks for what you do here at CH as you help parents navigate.
We love having you, by the way.
We do.
Well, thank you.
Such a great ad.
I really, really love my job, and I love that my 12 years of walking through really hard and really chaotic has landed me in the place I am now, but by the grace of God. So.
Well, we love it. We love you. Thanks for joining us here. Roy, always good to have you.
I love these. I love that we get to add our staff and have conversations like this. So
it's great. And everybody who's listening, thanks